Hi there, welcome to this live stream event for Caring for Vulnerable Children. My name is Graeme McPhee. I'm the lead educator on the Caring for Vulnerable Children programme. I'm based at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow in Scotland, although when I say I'm based there, like lots of people just now, I'm not physically based there, so if you watched 2 weeks ago, you'll recognise the surroundings as I'm broadcasting this from home. So thank you and welcome for joining us. So welcome both to people who are participants who are watching and engaging live, but I appreciate a lot of you, the time doesn't work out, so you watch the recording afterwards. So thanks for that also, and welcome to you guys as well. If you're with the programme in week 4 now, you'll most likely have experienced the first live stream event in week 2, so you'll have a sense of kind of what the format is for this session. What I'm going to be doing for the next 30 minutes or so is talk about or kind of respond to kind of some of the comments and questions that have been posted in various pages and in various threads, picking up on kind of various kind of topics of conversation. In a sense, for a lot of these subjects, I'll be offering my response, my take on a number of these, but there's a range of different kind of views existing all these different topics and issues. So I would encourage people both in real time. So if you're one of the people that's in the stream live and you want to either ask me a question or respond to something that I'm saying, please use the chat bar. You can see that Sarah's just posted a message there. Just now, asking people if they want to post questions, and I'll respond to them. Then, so either if you've got a question that you want to ask, or there's something that I say over the course of the next 30 minutes that you think you want to respond to in whatever way, then please post that, and I will come back to you. But in the absence of that, what I've done is that I've pulled out a number of kind of comments and posts that have appeared, and just kind of picking up on some of the themes and issues that are apparent in the discussions that have been happening, especially over the last 2 weeks. So before we get any further, in many ways, we really have our most global run of caring for vulnerable children this time round. So there's quite a number of you now, so we're now just under kind of 1,200 joiners for this session, for this run of the programme. So thanks very much, everybody that's joined. I guess what's quite unusual this time is that only 56% of you are from the UK. That number's normally up above 70%. So it's an unusually global cohort. So that's really good news. We've got 96 different countries represented in all the joiners, so you truly are global. I mean, unsurprisingly, we're a university based in the UK, so that's where most of our joiners come from. But we've got big numbers, especially from India, from Australia, from Canada. So welcome to everybody, and you're a very sociable lot. There's lots of comments getting posted. So we're seeing lots of interaction. So that's kind of really good news for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just start responding to kind of some questions and different comments that have come up on some of the different topics, especially over weeks 3 and 4. So we've had some interesting comments about some of the themes that we've been covering. So we've been thinking about love, we've been thinking about communication, we've been thinking about the role of touch within communication, and kind of just some kind of various other issues as well. So I'm going to start with a question that was posted by Lauren McSwiggan. So Lauren, thank you for posting your question. So I'm going to read out what Lauren's asked. She said, it's clear that society and the media have negative views of social workers, which contribute to arguably excessive legislation, disempower social workers and make them more risk averse, which in turn has a negative effect on children's well-being. Do you think it's actually possible to change this so that social workers feel more trusted in their roles and more able to show affection or love to children in their care? And if so, how? Right, so thanks for your question, Lauren. Kind of lots within it. So and again, just to reiterate, when I'm answering these questions, I guess I'm offering my take on these. So if other people have different takes, then please come in and kind of keep the conversation going. So in terms of the bit that you say about the media having a negative view a social work. I think it's very accurate to say, and also I'm basing my answer in my context in Scotland and the UK, but I think a lot of what I say holds true for lots of places, but I would encourage everybody, both in terms of what I'm talking about in this session, but also throughout the course more generally, think about how the themes that we're talking about apply in your setting, apply in your country, and in your context. Because I think and certainly the theme of caring for vulnerable children, I feel, is a totally transferable global issue, is something that we should all be concerned with. So when you talk about views of social workers, Lauren, in relation to the media, I would absolutely agree that now you say the media has a negative view of social workers. I think how I would phrase it is, I think we're much more likely to see social workers mentioned in the media when there's something negative, when something goes wrong. When social workers are doing their job well and effectively, which I feel is most of the time, then they tend to fly under the radar, and we don't see them representing the media. And no, we're more likely to see them become news when there's perceived to be a problem or things go wrong. So I think that's an issue for us. In terms of societal views of social workers, well, to a certain extent, I think that pretty much is dictated by who you speak to, because many individuals and families who are in receipt of social work services will speak in very positive terms about the support and guidance and services that they receive. And again, I'm not sure that that's something that's always kind of promoted or becomes big news. Now, am I saying that everybody who's in receipt of social work services feels that way? Absolutely not. Nothing's absolute in those terms, but many people do. But some of the negative stereotypes that do exist about social workers, which are perhaps more fueled by the fact that we're more likely to see social workers make the front news of the newspaper, for instance, if something is deemed to have gone wrong, then I think that can be, you talk about it being potentially disempowering or make social workers more risk averse. Well, yeah, I think there's an absolute potential for that. You talk about excessive legislation, and I'd be curious to know exactly what you mean by excessive legislation, and that wouldn't necessarily be an issue that I was concerned with, but I think actually this negative discourse about if social workers are perceived to do something wrong, then it can become big news and they become the whipping boys in some way. I think that has got the potential to kind of make people more guarded in terms of the practice, which in turn, yeah, absolutely can have a negative impact on children's well-being. So what can we do to kind of challenge kind of some of that? Well, I think to some extent, social work as a profession needs to take control of its own destiny, sort of thing, and because it's almost if we wait for the rest of the world to come round to our way of thinking or understand what we're about, then I think we'll just continue in the same cycle. So we perhaps need to be more proactive about promoting the role and purpose and positive impact of social work, and to educate society more generally. But I guess there are some kind of quite structural things as well, that if we compare social work, for instance, to some other professions, so such as health professionals or education, health professionals, health, education, etc., these are services that everybody engages with regardless. No, we all grow up and we all go to school, so we all engage with education. We all engage with kind of health services in some way. Whereas social work's a bit different in that regard. And for a lot of people, I think there's a connotation that you only engage with social work if, and however people might term this, if there's a problem or if kind of something's kind of gone wrong, in a sense. So there's a kind of deficit-based notion to that. So that's a challenge for us in terms of kind of how we can kind of try and turn some of that round and view, because there are statutory parts of social work in terms of kind of protection issues and sometimes enforcement issues, but an awful lot of practice in social work we would be classing as kind of more supportive and promoting and enabling, and certainly many of the social work students that I work with, especially at the beginning of their studies, and we ask them, why do you want to become a social worker? They don't answer that they want to become a social worker because they want to control people or have power or implement things. They want to help people. They want to make a contribution to society. They want to make a positive contribution and make society a better place and improve people's lives. And so I think there's perhaps a bit of a challenge for us as a profession as to how some of that becomes more of the norm. Now, your question about kind of how do we do that? we could talk from now till the end of the course about that and some of the challenges involved in that. But I guess I'll offer one observation. There's been various reviews there's been umpteen reviews of social work up and down the UK, different aspects of it, and making a whole range of different recommendations. But I'm drawn to kind of one piece of work that was carried out in Scotland in the early 2000s. It was a review of our child protection procedures. And part of that review compared, at that time, practice in Scotland to international practice. And there were some interesting messages about that, comparing the way things are set up in the UK to some other Western European countries where social pedagogy would be more prevalent. And that's something that we'll speak about more in due course as part of the programme, social pedagogy. But they made the observation within that if some of the tasks associated with social work became more mainstream, and by that I mean that people, by virtue of living in a place and being part of society, are more likely to encounter social workers in a more supportive, everyday way, perhaps at a very low level and low key, then it does mean that when somebody in a social work type role has to get more involved in a different sort of way, there's less of a potential stigma to it. Going back to that part about sometimes the perceptions that social work involvement is associated with kind of problems or a kind of deficit-based model, whereas if everybody engages with these sorts of professionals more routinely, it means when they need to do something more as part of that role, it encounters less of these barriers that you're talking about. So there's absolutely, it's a fascinating subject, and there's a lot for us to think about, but it very much connects into the theme of love, which we've been kind of talking about. And also you heard from Jenny Malloy as part of the material this week, and kind of really glad that Jenny agreed to be part of the course for us in terms of the just how powerful a speaker she is, and reflecting on her experiences of growing up within the care system and how she both felt about that at the time, and then perhaps just as significantly in the context of our conversation now, reflecting on that as an adult in terms of kind of what was supportive and effective for her, and what was really kind of meaningful for her. And it brings us to this kind of subject of love, and it perhaps links back to kind of Lauren's comments about kind of sometimes either social workers or other care professionals kind of risk averse, and about if an agenda that kind of somehow forbids relationships, truly caring, and it ties into this notion of touch as well, which has been another part of the conversation, and about that we undoubtedly we seem in a worse place if we end up from a kind of professional practice point of view, if either by design or accident practitioners end up in a place where they don't feel enabled to truly care for and claim for and look after the children and young people that they're working with. And if they feel that somehow they've got to be a bit tentative or distant or holding back in some way because of how that might be perceived or what might happen if something was seen to go wrong, and would the notion of blame be put back on them? So this notion of kind of risk averseness, and it very much ties into the theme of touch. So I'm going to kind of pull out one comment that was made, and it was by Amanda Irving. So Amanda, thanks very much for your comment. You say a couple of things. I want to pull out one part of it. You said, the sheer thought of eradicating the act of touching in schools is ridiculous to me. There are situations where touching someone is necessary to protect them from any kind of danger. Educators should exercise judgment on the appropriateness of a situation where touch is needed. Now, that last part that you say there, educators should exercise judgment on the appropriateness of a situation where touch is needed. I and many others would absolutely agree with you, Amanda. But unfortunately, we've got a situation certainly kind of in many kind of especially education settings, whereas practitioners, be it teachers or other professionals working within schools, are given very different messages about kind of what's appropriate or not, especially in relation to touch. And those will be justified in terms of, this is about keeping the children safe, because we've had instances before where people have overstepped boundaries and things have happened that they shouldn't have happened, and so this kind of hold them back in a sense is justified in terms of, this is what we need to do to keep children safe. And Amanda, you mentioned touch in the context of protecting children from any kind of danger. I guess what I'm really mindful of is the younger we go, especially kind of thinking about kind of nursery and young primary age school children, in terms of kind of pastoral care and support and such like. And I think it's a really sad situation if we're in a situation where we're giving messages to teachers or other practitioners that touch is somehow forbidden or not to be promoted, and this being justified in terms of, this isn't the best interest of the children. Because isn't it that, I mean, the more cynical interpretation might be, this isn't the potential in the best interest of the organisation, because it's about them trying to bulletproof themselves from accusations about kind of things going wrong. But actually, does it do the children a service in the long term? Does it help them? Does it provide them with what they need? And then let's connect this back to what Jenny Malloy was talking about in terms of, because love and touch are two absolutely different conversations, but they're linked in some way in terms of the way that we care for and demonstrate that caring to children and young people. And so I've got another comment here from Sarah Smith. So Sarah, thanks again for your comment. And you said, love can be the simple act of caring, offering time, support, remembering the little details. It is so complex and much more than a declaration of love. And I think that's a really important point that you highlight, Sarah. When we're talking about love, I think sometimes we almost get, the conversation almost gets hijacked about the use of the word. Now, the use of the word is controversial in many settings. There's no denying that. But when I'm kind of thinking about this, I'm less concerned about the use of the word, and I'm more concerned about how do we demonstrate and communicate to children and young people that we absolutely care about them. And for them to experience that claiming, that warmth, that love, because that's what we would want children within the care system or any system to be experiencing. And the adults that are engaging with them, that are working for them, absolutely care about them, have absolutely got their back, and are going to do what is needed in order that they feel safe, they feel cared for, they feel loved. And how we all experience love, if I were to ask the question to everybody that's registered on this programme, all 1,196 of you, define love, define how you experience love, I would get 1,196 different answers. So I think we should be less concerned about this, the use of the language per se, and more kind of think about what are the kind of common denominators in there in terms of kind of what makes people feel safe, feel loved, feel kind of claimed for. And then we need to enable practitioners, and I use the word practitioners because we started by talking about social workers, we moved on to talking about kind of teachers or people in school, thinking about all the different range of professionals and volunteers that might be involved in caring for vulnerable children wherever you are in your setting, and how do we enable them to practice in a way where they communicate love, claiming, where they communicate to children that I'm here for you. I've got your back, and I know what I need to know, and I can say what I need to say when I need to say it, and for practitioners to not feel hamstrung by, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? Now we still need them to engage in professional judgment. So as I'm saying this, it's not a carte blanche that practitioners can just do and say anything. It's got to be within appropriate professional boundaries. So actually, let me come back to that. There's there's some other comments made with regards to touch and about the notion of consent. And actually, it was Amanda Irvin again. So Amanda, thanks for your comment. And yeah, you were talking about kind of being surprised about the responses in the UK, but there was also comments about consent, and so when we are talking about touch, for instance, the notion that how that discussion can't be misinterpreted is if we're saying to practitioners, let's try and move away from this absolutely risk-averse, you're not allowed to have touch, to where touch is legitimate and touch is allowed. And what we can't do is swing to the other side, is it's a free-for-all, because it's got to be on the terms in a way that is safe and comfortable for the children and young people. So by me kind of arguing this, be it about love or be it about touch, and I see them as kind of in some ways part of the same spectrum at different parts on that continuum. It's almost that they've got to be on the agenda, but the way in which we interact with and respond to and behave towards each individual child should be very much child-centred. So it shouldn't just be that, like, we are allowed to practice in this way now. So I'm going to be constantly kind of holding hands or touching, kind of feeling the need to physically touch children, just for the sake of doing it. In that sense, it's always got to be kind of child-centred and child-driven. I want to kind of change tact almost kind of completely now to a certain extent, because there's been another couple of interesting comments which have got a similar theme to them when we've been talking about communication, which is about material that's not in the course per se, because the course was written pre-COVID. But when we're talking about communication, and seen a couple of interesting comments about communication in the light of COVID-19 and wearing masks, and this is a really kind of significant and important question. So with that, a couple of comments. So I'm just pulling out a couple here at random. Jeanette Navel will start with, communication is now very difficult since people are wearing masks, and you've got eye contact, but the norm of not being able to see the lips and moving can be a challenge as well. There was another comment, somebody said that as a hearing impaired person, I'm finding communication with people wearing masks very difficult, as I can't read their lips, and it causes me frustration and anxiety that I'm missing something really important people might be telling me. So it must be especially difficult for those who are vulnerable and at risk. And yeah, absolutely. And I can thanks for sharing that and making that comment. And Don Roberts also kind of makes a comment. Yeah, kind of COVID pandemic has left a lot of people feeling vulnerable and created a great deal of tension. People communicate kind of wearing masks so you can't see their facial expressions. So that's kind of common theme come up, and it's something actually that I've been talking about at a context very close to home. My wife is training as a play therapist, and she's out on placement a day a week working with different children, and often they're kind of quite young primary school children, and she's had to start wearing a mask in these one-to-one sessions. And And that's obviously really significant. It's almost just exactly the points that people have made in their comments about the kind of children trying to communicate with an adult in a one-to-one setting, and then by dint of the COVID and the restrictions we've had to put in place, we've had to put this barrier in place that kind of is making communication that bit more difficult. And I guess I've been experiencing this in different ways, because I'm kind of masks of different shapes and sizes. So sometimes you're not actually seeing that much of somebody's face at all, and kind of knowing how to interpret what they're saying and feeling, can you get the kind of context, the nuance, and things like that. So I think there's a lot. It's been interesting, a lot of really interesting and I think really kind of valid points getting made in the conversation over the last couple of weeks, especially round about this theme of communication. And I guess, obviously we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't have to, but it's a public health issue. I guess I've seen some interest enough about kind of trying to make see-through masks are visible, but and kind of picking up on the comments about lip reading and things like that, so where that's possible, and that might help to kind of reduce kind of some of those some of those issues. But I think it's interesting, especially kind of Jeanette, your comment about thinking about when those who we might deem who are already vulnerable or at risk, and then this is potentially putting further barriers in place, and about the kind of challenges that will kind of create for us. Now, I want to finish with kind of one other kind of last comment, and I'm probably going to run on a wee bit past the 30-minute mark by doing this, because it feels like that this is I'm saying let's finish with this last comment, and it's a huge issue, and it's a comment made by Sarah Smith. So Sarah, thanks for your thanks for your comment. And Sarah, so for people from the UK, you're probably very familiar with what Sarah has commented about. For others out with the UK, just to give you a little bit of context, Sarah has made a comment commenting on a big issue, a big discussion that's cropped up in the UK, and it was about supporting vulnerable children during the school holiday period with free school meals. So this is children who typically, when they're at school, would qualify for free school meals. And there was a very public campaign, interestingly led by a young professional footballer who had grown up in poverty himself, is now a multi-millionaire, but had grown up in poverty and had been in receipt of free school meals as a youngster, so very much speaking from experience, and led twice now, once over the summer holidays and once over the October holidays, kind of led two very public campaigns challenging the government, largely in England, because the administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland kind of did something different and put more supports in place, but largely challenged the English government, saying, you've got a moral duty to respond to and care for these children during school holidays, because children will be going hungry. And I think what Sarah is, I mean, there's so much that we could talk about in this, but I think you highlight some really interesting points, and you highlight about the language that has been used in a lot of the discussion round about this, and you say the language to yourself often comes across as discriminatory or non-supportive, judgments made on why a child or family are vulnerable, and less financial support for the more vulnerable, services not being available, and families at risk, struggling yet judged because they smoke or have a big TV. And I can identify this completely, and I witnessed one conversation on television where, and I wouldn't say who the person is, but is a kind of media personality that I probably don't have a lot of time for. So I wasn't expecting this person to say anything that I necessarily agreed with. And then they actually surprised me, because they started speaking and they started saying, I'm kind of really disappointed with the government's response here. I think they need to move in this. So I'm kind of sitting, all right, this is good. This is a kind of, I'm being positively challenged here. This isn't necessarily what I expected to hear. But then they threw in the comment, because it's naive to think that these parents are going to change during the October holiday. and are going to have a change of heart and become reformed characters. So that the assertion being that the only reason that these children are potentially hungry and because these issues are happening is something to do with the moral character and some judgment on the parents' behalf, and absolutely no recognition of the hugely challenging and difficult circumstances that families up and down the country are living in day to day, especially in light of COVID-19 and the pandemic and the increasing challenges that family are faced, ignoring the fact that a scary proportion of children who live in poverty in the UK live in families where the adults are in work. This is work-based poverty. So you're right, Sarah. No, we're seeing comments where these families are being judged about what they're doing or not doing, and that there's almost this narrative that they're lazy, they're on benefits. It's just almost this sense of the state should be providing for me. Many of the children we're actually speaking about here are living in families where adults are working, and often adults are working more than one job. And any analysis of that can lead you to the conclusion the issue here is structural inequality in terms of employment and employment patterns and wages and other such things, rather than blaming parents, and just the whole structural inequality that prevents families and adults moving themselves into a different place. And it has been sadly, in some ways, thinking this discussion playing out as this run of caring for vulnerable children is coming along. And in one sense, I'm thinking there's a lot of stuff happening within this discussion that is really relevant for the course. So from an education perspective, that's topical and timely because it fits in with the curriculum. But there's another part of me thinking, oh my goodness, we're going through this conversation again, and when will we ever move on from this? And because until we change this conversation, until we change some of these stereotypes, and Sarah, you're right, until we absolutely challenge some of the judgments that are continually made about families and children of families who experience these issues and the very discriminatory ways in which they're spoken about and thought about, and how they get put into a box about being feckless and making these choices for themselves in some way. We're continually going to be going round this circle in terms of how we truly try and respond to risk and vulnerability and need in a more meaningful and nuanced way. As I say, Sarah, thanks for your comment. As I say, I could probably have spoken about that whole issue for half an hour. To widen that out to people that are not from the UK, I guess I'd be encouraging you to think about these issues about risk and vulnerability, and in terms of children, or perhaps more typically families in receipt of services, and what Sarah's commenting on here is about the how sometimes are these families viewed, how are they portrayed, how are they spoken about, what sort of language it's used, because this is all hugely powerful in terms of the services that will in the end be put in place for them. And I guess just to actually throw in one last thing again from a UK context, because I saw it in the front page of our newspapers in the last 24 hours before I came into the live stream today. We've just had an announcement in the UK so on the back of this discussion in the UK, where there's a whole hullabaloo about can they find this money to feed children during school holidays, to feed a certain amount of children during school holidays. And I can't remember the exact bill that they put on this, but given what the government's having to pay just now during COVID and during the pandemic, in the grand scheme of things, it was a tiny amount of money. So we see the government almost only being forced into spending or committing this money, but almost like kicking and screaming. But then last night we see the announcement that our armed forces are going to get investment to the tune of £16 billion. And I saw some comments straight away about what does that tell you about priorities and values and other such things, that we've been going round in circles and having this debate about, can we find the money to feed these children during school holidays to stop them being hungry? But in another context, £16 billion and the armed services. And I'm not sitting here kind of starting a campaign saying that we don't necessarily need any military services, but there's something really interesting there about the value that we place in different things and how we think about responding to children who experience risk and vulnerability, and sometimes how that response to those children can be wrapped up in how we view their families and their parents and some of the perhaps more problematic or judgmental attitudes that I feel can exist. So I've ran over a bit longer than I planned to. Thank you very much to everybody who has participated in the programme for the first 4 weeks and the comments that you have been posting. We'll have our final live stream at the end of week 6. There will be another couple of polls in the same way that there was in weeks 1 and 2, and I'll be talking about them, but I'll also be kind of picking up some different themes from the comments that you've been speaking about, and we'll speak more about Billy's story. Again, that's not something that we've picked up on this time, but in 2 weeks' time we will be speaking about Billy's story, because one of the polls you'll be doing will be connected to that. So I say thank you very much for your participation in the course so far. Enjoy the next 2 weeks. Stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.